What does the Bible say about choosing a partner? The Bible never gives you a list. It never says, find someone who is this tall, this educated, this successful. It never gives you a checklist for the perfect spouse. But here is what most people miss. Across thousands of years of Scripture, from Genesis all the way to the New Testament, there is a pattern, a consistent, recurring, unmistakable pattern of what God prioritizes when His people choose a partner. And when they followed it, families were built that changed nations. When they ignored it, even the wisest man who ever lived lost everything. Today, we trace that pattern and let Scripture speak for itself. Example 1. Abraham's servant, the first recorded search for a partner in Scripture. The first detailed account of intentionally choosing a marriage partner in Scripture is found in Genesis 24, and it is remarkably instructive. Abraham is old. His son, Isaac, needs a wife, and Abraham does something that reveals exactly what he considered non-negotiable in a partner for his son. He calls his most trusted servant and gives him one clear instruction. Do not take a wife for Isaac from the Canaanites among whom they lived. Go back to my own country, my own people, and find a wife from there. Now, why did this matter so much to Abraham? It was never about ethnicity. Abraham had lived among and interacted peacefully with many different peoples. The issue was entirely spiritual. The Canaanites worshipped other gods. They had built their entire culture, their values, their family structures, their moral framework around deities that were fundamentally opposed to the God of Abraham. Bringing that into a marriage, into a home, would divide the household at its very foundation. The servant travels to Mesopotamia, prays specifically for God's guidance, and finds Rebekah, a woman from Abraham's own family who served the same God. He doesn't choose based on beauty alone, though Rebekah was beautiful. He chooses based on character, watching how she serves, how she responds, what kind of person she is in her ordinary daily life. The pattern begins here: faith alignment, character over appearance, and prayer in the process. Example 2. Jacob. The pattern continues with Jacob, Isaac's son. In Genesis 28, Isaac calls Jacob and gives him an explicit instruction: do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father, and take a wife from there. Again, same principle, not ethnicity, faith and values alignment. Jacob travels, works 14 years for the woman he loves, and builds a family that becomes the 12 tribes of Israel, the foundation of an entire nation. But notice something important in Jacob's story. When his brother Esau saw that the Canaanite women displeased his father Isaac, he went and married Ishmael's daughter, thinking that would satisfy his parents. He was trying to fix the external issue without understanding the internal principle. This is a warning the Bible embeds quietly in the narrative. You can make all the right external choices, marry someone who looks right on paper, comes from the right background, ticks the visible boxes, and still miss the point entirely, if the heart alignment isn't there. The issue was never where the person came from. It was always who they served. Example 3. God's direct warning to Israelites. He said, don't marry those who serve other gods. By the time Israel enters the Promised Land, God makes the principle explicit. Deuteronomy 7:3-4. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods. Notice the reason God gives. Not, they are different from you. Not, they come from another nation. The reason is entirely spiritual. They will turn your heart away. This is the core of the entire biblical pattern on marriage. God is not concerned with cultural differences, language differences, or ethnic differences. He is concerned with one thing: the direction your household will face. Who will sit at the center of your home? Which God will be served under your roof? And then comes Solomon, the proof of what happens when this principle is ignored. 1 Kings 11 records that Solomon loved many foreign women, and Scripture is careful to tell us why this was the problem. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Solomon received more wisdom from God than any human being before or after him. He built the temple. He wrote Proverbs. He wrote Ecclesiastes. He wrote the Song of Solomon. And he lost it all, not through military defeat, not through financial collapse, but through the slow, consistent influence of partners who pulled his heart in a different direction. By the end of his life, Solomon was building altars to gods he once would have rejected without hesitation, not because he was foolish, because the daily influence of those closest to us shapes us in ways we often cannot see until it is too late. If it happened to Solomon, it can happen to anyone. Example 4. Ruth and Boaz. Now here is where the pattern becomes even more profound, because it cuts both ways. Ruth was a Moabite, a foreigner, from a people that Israel had a complicated history with. By a surface reading of the principle, she should have been outside the boundaries of who an Israelite should marry. But Ruth 1:16 records her declaration to her mother-in-law Naomi, "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Ruth did not simply change her location, she changed her allegiance. She turned from the gods of Moab and chose the God of Israel with her whole heart. And what happened? She married Boaz, a man of great character and faith. She is listed in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Matthew 1, a Moabite woman, in the direct bloodline of the Messiah. This is the Bible clarifying its own principle with beautiful precision. The issue was never where you came from. It was never your ethnicity or your nationality. It was always, whose God do you serve? Where is your heart pointed? A foreigner who turns fully to God is more suitable as a partner than a fellow Israelite who has turned away from him. Let's see into what the New Testament upholds. The New Testament does not abandon this pattern. It crystallizes it into one of the most quoted and most misunderstood verses on relationships in all of Scripture. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? A yoke in the ancient world was the wooden bar that connected two animals so they could pull together. When two animals of different sizes and strengths were yoked together, they couldn't walk in the same direction. One would constantly pull against the other. Progress became impossible. The work became suffering. Paul uses this image deliberately. A marriage between two people of fundamentally different spiritual foundations is not just difficult, it is structurally misaligned. Not because one person is better than the other, but because they are pulling in different directions at the level of their deepest values. How they raise children, how they handle money, what they sacrifice for, what they ultimately live for. If the answer is no, the yoke will strain every time. So what does all of this mean practically for someone choosing a partner today? The Bible's consistent pattern across every generation points to 4 things. Faith alignment above everything else. Not the same denomination, not the same church background. The same God, the same lordship, the same ultimate allegiance. This is non-negotiable in Scripture, from Abraham to Paul. Character revealed in ordinary life.
Abraham's servant didn't evaluate Rebekah in her best moments. He watched her at a well, doing ordinary daily work. Boaz noticed Ruth's character before he noticed anything else about her. The Bible consistently points to who a person is when nobody is watching, not who they are when they are trying to impress. The long-term influence of a partner. Solomon is the warning every generation needs to hear. You did not just marry a person, you marry the direction they are moving. You marry their priorities, their habits, their relationship with God, or their distance from Him. And over years and decades, that direction shapes you whether you realize it or not. Prayer and seeking God in the process. Abraham's servant prayed before he found Rebekah. The entire search for Isaac's wife was bathed in dependence on God. The Bible never presents choosing a partner as purely a human decision. It is a decision made in partnership with the God who knows both people completely. In conclusion, the Bible never gives you a checklist, but it gives you something better, a pattern tested across thousands of years of human history, a pattern that shows what makes a household strong, what tears one apart, and what God considers when He looks at two people building a life together. Faith alignment, character over appearance, long-term influence, and God in the process. These are not restrictions. They are the architecture of a marriage that can actually last. Whoever you are waiting for, praying for, or walking with right now, bring it back to the pattern, not the checklist, the pattern. Because the same God who guided Abraham's servant to Rebekah, who led Ruth to Boaz, who designed the yoke that two people carry together, He is still guiding. He is still faithful, and He knows exactly what He is doing. If this opened the Word for you, subscribe to Written in the Word. Every week we go deeper into the questions that matter most, the ones written in the Word that most people never stop to ask. See you next week.